Are you looking for an edge, flexible income, and immediate professional respect? Discover the hidden opportunity of becoming a public official with the book, Becoming a Notary by Derek Spruill. This beginner's guide provides the universal roadmap to launch your new career. You will learn the core mission of deterring fraud, the essential tools of the trade, and exactly how to protect yourself while building a respected business. Get your copy of Becoming a Notary on Amazon, and step into a rewarding profession.
Imagine just doing your job flawlessly. I mean, you check the identification, you ask all the right questions, you carefully press your rubber stamp onto a piece of paper, and you sign your name. It takes, what, maybe 4 minutes?
Yeah, if that.
Right? And you go home, you eat dinner, you sleep soundly, and then 6 months later, you are sitting in a sterile civil court deposition room watching your $100,000 insurance policy just completely evaporate.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
It really is.
Yeah.
You are suddenly looking at paying tens of thousands of dollars out of your own pocket to attorneys, all because of a transaction you barely even remember. So welcome to Notary Knowledge. For those of you listening, you probably think of this as a mundane, trivial administrative chore.
Most people do.
Right. But today, we're looking at the massive hidden liability of the notary public.
It really is the ultimate hidden front line. I mean, when you walk into a shipping store or a bank branch and hand over a few dollars for a stamp, it feels entirely inconsequential. But beneath that rubber seal is this high-stakes, uncompromising legal landscape. It forms the absolute bedrock of our civil and commercial trust.
And that is exactly our mission for this show. We're going to completely demystify this invisible architecture for you. Because whether you are a novice real estate investor closing your first deal, or a paralegal, or just someone trying to get a car title transferred, you really need to understand the immense liability attached to this role.
Absolutely.
So we are pulling from a massive stack of sources today. We've come through state statutes spanning from New York to California, Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, and we also going through actual errors and omissions, or E&O, court case files. These are the real-world lawsuits where things went horribly, devastatingly wrong.
And to tie all of this statutory and case law together, we are leaning heavily on several expert frameworks. Most notably, Derek Spruill's authoritative text, the Notary Public Foundation. If you don't have it, it does a brilliant job of recontextualizing the notary, not as a clerk, but as an impartial guardian of truth.
It's a must-read, and I promise you, by the time we finish this analysis, you will never look at a property deed, a last will and testament, or even your own signature the same way again.
Never.
So let's start with the basic mechanics. Before we can analyze the catastrophic lawsuits, we have to establish what is actually happening when ink meets paper. Because, as the sources emphasize repeatedly, it is not just stamping a document.
Far from it. The notary is performing a highly specific, legally binding notarial act. And if you look at the foundation of almost all commercial and personal transactions in the U.S., they rely on two primary acts, the acknowledgement and the jurat. And the legal system separates these two acts for very distinct, profound reasons.
Let's take the acknowledgement first. Just from reading Spruill's framework and the state codes, the acknowledgement essentially serves as a mechanism to verify free will.
That is the perfect way to frame it. I mean, the acknowledgement is the state's way of ensuring that a citizen is executing a document voluntarily without duress, coercion, or undue influence.
Right.
The notary is acting as the state's impartial witness to confirm two things. First, that the person standing in front of them is definitively who they claim to be, and second, that they genuinely intend to be bound by whatever contract they are signing.
But here is the procedural quirk that I think is just utterly fascinating, and it trips up even seasoned professionals all the time. For an acknowledgement, the physical signing of the document can actually happen in the past.
Yes. The timeline of the signature is a crucial distinction here. If you are listening to this and you are selling a property, you could have signed that massive stack of deeds at your kitchen table, last Tuesday.
The ink is completely dry.
Exactly. You do not need to sign it again. But today, you must physically appear before the notary, present your valid, unexpired ID, and verbally acknowledge to that official that the signature from last Tuesday is indeed yours and that you made it willingly.
So the notary isn't verifying the act of signing. They are verifying the present-day reality of a past action.
Precisely. You are confirming the reality of that past action in the present moment. This is the standard for documents that transfer massive amounts of wealth or authority, like real estate deeds or a durable power of attorney. The court system needs absolute assurance that nobody was standing over you in the shadows with a metaphorical club, forcing you to sign away your assets.
Wow. Okay, so if the acknowledgement is about protecting your free will, the jurat seems to be about binding you to reality. The stakes elevate dramatically here.
Oh, they do. The jurat is the absolute truth act, and this is where the liability for the signer transforms. Unlike the acknowledgement, the timeline for a jurat is rigid. You cannot bring in a pre-signed document. It is legally impossible to perform a jurat on a signature that happened yesterday.
Wait, so if I bring in an affidavit that I signed in my car before walking into the office, the notary has to essentially reset the clock.
They have to force you to sign it again, right then and there. The statutory requirement for a jurat is direct physical observation of the act of signing. The notary has to watch the pen move across the paper, but, the signature is only the first half of the equation.
Right, then comes the verbal binding.
The oath. Once the ink is on the paper, the notary must administer a formal verbal oath or affirmation. They will literally ask you to raise your right hand, and they will ask something like, do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the contents of this document are true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Let's pause on that exact phrase, under penalty of perjury, because that fundamentally changes what the document is. If I understand this correctly, you aren't just signing a piece of paper anymore, you are actively testifying.
You are. When you look the notary in the eye and say, I do, you have just placed your own liberty on the line.
Wow.
If it's later discovered that the document contains a fabrication, say you lied about your assets on a financial affidavit, you haven't just breached a contract, you've committed a criminal offense, you can be prosecuted for perjury, and the notary stamp is the official state mechanism that locked you into that liability.
So to put this into an analogy, to help clarify the mechanics for everyone listening, an acknowledgement is essentially the legal system's coercion detector. It's making sure nobody is holding a gun to your head. But a jurat is a lie detector. It is making you legally, criminally liable if the statements you are making are fabricated.
Coercion detector versus lie detector is an excellent conceptual model. It separates free will from absolute truth. But notice the one non-negotiable factor that inextricably links both of these acts together. It is what Sproul and the other legal frameworks refer to as the golden rule of notarization.
The physical presence mandate.
A physical presence mandate. In a traditional paper notarization, this cannot be bypassed, negotiated, or waived. It cannot be done over a phone call. It cannot be done over a FaceTime chat or a Skype session.
Right. None of that.
It doesn't matter if the notary is your oldest friend, if they've known you for 30 years, and if they could recognize your voice in a hurricane. If you are not breathing the same air in the exact same physical space at the exact time the notarial act occurs, the execution is fatally flawed.
And we are going to dive into the E&O court cases later to see exactly how violating that physical presence rule just destroys people's lives and finances. But before we get to those disasters, let's examine the anatomy of the certificate itself, because the sources make it clear that a notary doesn't just slap a seal on a page and call it a day.
No, not at all.
The certificate, that block of text usually found at the very bottom of the document, is a highly regulated piece of testimony.
That certificate is the notary's sworn statement to the world about what just happened in that room. It is a vital legal record. And a flawless certificate must contain what the industry calls the 4 W's: where, who, when, and what.
Let's skip the dictionary definitions here, because if you deal with contracts regularly, you know what a venue block looks like. The where, state of X, county of Y. But the trap here isn't knowing what the venue is, it's the jurisdictional nightmare it represents, right?
That is the exact friction point. The venue dictates the geographical location where the physical meeting actually occurred. Not where the contract was drafted, not where the property is located, but where the notary and the signer were physically standing. This establishes jurisdictional authority. A notary is commissioned by a specific state. If a New York notary travels to Florida for a winter vacation and decides to do a quick favor for a friend down there by notarizing a document, they have operated completely outside their legal jurisdiction. The act is void. The venue block exists to explicitly expose or confirm that authority.
And as we move into remote online notarization, or ON, that definition of where gets incredibly complex. But we will touch on that technological headache later. Let's look at the second, W, the who. This is the exact name of the signer. And just reading the sources, it is staggering how often this specific element ruins multi-million-dollar transactions.
It happens constantly, mostly due to sheer administrative fatigue. A notary is busy, the signer is rushing them, so the notary stamps the page, signs their own name, and completely neglects to write the signer's name in the blank space that reads, "Personally appeared before me, blank."
Which essentially creates a blank check on a legal document.
Exactly. If the who is missing, the certificate testifies to absolutely nothing. It is a sworn statement that someone appeared, but who? A county recorder's office auditing a property deed will reject that document outright. It's fatally flawed on its face.
Then we have the when, the exact date. And this is where timelines become weaponized in litigation.
Oh, absolutely. The when must be the exact present date of the notarial act. And, the temptation to manipulate this is immense. A real estate agent might beg a notary to backdate a certificate by 1 day so a locked-in interest rate doesn't expire.
Yeah, you hear about that all the time.
Or a lawyer might ask a notary to post-date a document. But the legal timeline of complex events relies entirely on the absolute truth of that date. Falsifying the when isn't just an error. It is often prosecuted as fraud.
And finally,
Which loops us back to our first discussion. What is a specific type of notarial act? The wording of the certificate must explicitly state the procedure. Did the person swear a binding oath of perjury, a jurat, or did they simply acknowledge their signature? You cannot mix the wording and you cannot leave it ambiguous.
The incredible thing here, diving deep into these state statutes, is just how uncompromising the system is. I mean, missing one element, leaving the venue blank, slightly smudging the ink on the rubber seal so the expiration date is illegible. It can cause a document worth $10 million to be thrown out of court. The rigidity feels almost archaic.
It feels archaic because it is one of the oldest legal mechanisms we still use. But it has to be rigid. The stakes demand it. Because, as Sproul so eloquently outlines in his framework, the notary is performing a kind of legal alchemy.
Alchemy.
Yeah. They're taking a private instrument, which is essentially just a piece of paper with ink on it, and they're converting it into a public document.
And we're going to get into exactly what that legal alchemy means in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And speaking of keeping all these rigid rules and records straight, if you are looking to streamline your journal process, you need to check out the One Ledger Notary eJournal on the Apple App Store.
It is a fantastic tool.
It really is. It was crafted by the Magnificent Works team, and it just takes so much of the administrative stress out of the job. And for our listeners, if you use the code NOTARYKNOW50, that's NOTARYKNOW50, you get 50% off the first year annual plan.
And while you're upgrading your tools, be sure to encourage yourselves and your colleagues to buy the Notary Knowledge books by Derek Sproul and visit Notary Knowledge website. The resources there are just invaluable for both novices and veterans.
All right, welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about this idea of legal alchemy, converting a private instrument into a public document. What does that actually mean, practically speaking?
It means that by affixing that state-sanctioned stamp, the notary is granting that piece of paper a legal presumption of authenticity. In the courtroom, it becomes prima facie evidence.
Meaning on its face.
Yes. On its face, without further investigation, the judicial system accepts that the signature is genuine. A judge doesn't have to halt a trial to subpoena handwriting experts to prove the document wasn't forged. It streamlines the entire machinery of civil law.
And this is a massive structural, but that entire streamlined system of trust hinges completely on one single fragile assumption, which actually brings us to a topic we discuss all the time on Foundational Fridays: disqualifying interest and when to walk away.
Yes, the impartiality imperative, the assumption that the human being wielding that stamp is totally, unequivocally unbiased. If the notary has any skin in the game, the entire foundation collapses.
So let's break down the ethical boundaries here, specifically financial interest versus beneficial interest, because this is where notaries start walking into absolute minefields.
A direct financial interest is the most obvious red line. The notary stands to gain or lose actual capital as a direct result of the transaction. For example, you cannot notarize a property deed where you are listed as the buyer or the seller of the house.
Right. You can't officially verify your own transfer of wealth. That's obvious. But what about the downstream financial interests?
That is where professionals get themselves into deep trouble. Imagine a scenario where a real estate broker also happens to hold a notary commission. If the deal closes today, the broker makes a $45,000 commission check. The mobile notary they hired is stuck in traffic. So the broker just pulls out their own notary stamp to notarize the buyer's signature.
Just trying to push the deal across the finish line.
Exactly. But doing that is illegal in almost every jurisdiction. That broker has a $45,000 financial incentive for that document to be valid. Their impartiality is completely destroyed by the financial weight of the outcome.
That makes perfect logical sense. But then we have beneficial interest, which I find a bit more insidious because it doesn't always involve a direct payout of cash.
Right. A beneficial interest involves gaining a non-monetary, structural, or future advantage. This triggers anytime the notary is named in the document in some authoritative capacity. Like, you cannot notarize a last will and testament if you are named as the executor. You're receiving a transfer of authority which instantly disqualifies you.
Which leads us directly into what I think is the most complicated area of impartiality: the family trap. When you read through the different state statutes regarding notarizing for relatives, it is a wild, contradictory patchwork.
It is incredibly fragmented, and the reason is that family relationships inherently imply a shared beneficial interest.
Let's look at the strict states first. Florida and Massachusetts take a very hard line. Florida explicitly bans you from notarizing for your parents, children, or spouse. Massachusetts bans you from notarizing for step-relatives, half-siblings, and domestic partners.
In those jurisdictions, the state has decided the risk of hidden financial benefit is simply too high. It's a blight line rule. Cross it, and your commission is revoked.
Then you have the middle ground states: North Dakota, Oregon, Virginia, West Virginia. They prohibit notarizing for a spouse, but leave the door cracked for other relatives, though they heavily recommend against it.
Because spouses share finances in a commingled way.
But here's where it gets genuinely dangerous. States like Texas, Illinois, and California do not actually have a hard statutory ban on notarizing for most family members. I could read the Texas Notary Code, and I won't find a law that explicitly says you cannot notarize a document for your sister.
That's correct. However, California is a prime example of why this is a massive trap, because it's a community property state. The web of who benefits from whose assets is incredibly tangled.
Let's pose a hypothetical here. Imagine you live in Texas. It's a Tuesday night. Your brother comes over and needs a simple permission slip notarized so his kid can go on a school trip. No money is changing hands. The law doesn't explicitly ban it, so why shouldn't you just pull out your stamp, do your brother a solid, and get it done?
To understand why you shouldn't, you have to look at what happens if that document is ever challenged in court. We have to go back to prima facie evidence.
The judicial presumption that the document is valid on its face.
Exactly. But if you notarize that travel permission slip for your brother and it ends up in a brutal contested custody battle between your brother and his ex-wife.
Oh, the ex-wife's lawyer is going to have a field day.
They will stand up in court and say, Your Honor, the impartial state witness who verified this document is the father's own sibling. Any judge will look at that and conclude you are inherently biased. And the very second the judge makes that determination, the prima facie status evaporates. The burden of proof aggressively shifts.
So what does that mean practically?
It means you and your brother now have to spend thousands of dollars in attorney fees just to prove that the signature wasn't forged. By trying to save him a 30-minute errand, you have invited a massive legal nightmare into your lives. Treat your stamp as if it is biologically locked out of your family tree.
That is such a vital warning. So you've established your ethical boundaries, you've turned away your brother, you are sitting at your desk ready to execute your duty. And then a stressed customer walks in, hands you a blank document, and begs for your help. Enter the danger zone, the unauthorized practice of law, or UPL.
This is perhaps the most common way that deeply well-meaning notaries get into serious legal jeopardy.
Let's paint the picture. A customer comes in dealing with a medical emergency. They hand you a durable power of attorney. But at the bottom, there is no notarial certificate. Just a blank line.
The classic blank document dilemma.
The customer says, I don't know what kind of notarization I need. You're the expert. What do you think? Now, you probably know that powers of attorney usually utilize an acknowledgement. Why can't you just say, oh, you need an acknowledgement, print one out, and send them on their way?
Because the very second you make that decision for them, you have committed the unauthorized practice of law. You've committed a crime.
Just by choosing a piece of paper? That seems incredibly harsh.
Choosing the certificate fundamentally alters the legal reality of the document. If you attach a jurat, you are actively making the legal decision to place that citizen under a sworn oath subject to perjury. If you attach an acknowledgement, you decide they do not need to be under oath. Unless you hold an active license to practice law in that specific state, you have absolutely zero authority to make that determination.
In Sproul's text, there is an analogy that perfectly encapsulates this. It compares being a notary to being trained in CPR.
It is a phenomenal comparison.
As a notary, you are the CPR lifeguard of the legal system. You are trained for a specific administrative procedure.
Right.
But giving legal advice, like telling a citizen which certificate to use, is like a lifeguard deciding to perform open-heart surgery on the beach. The patient dies, and you go to jail.
That is the harsh reality. Notaries are strictly ministerial officials, and this strict prohibition goes much further than just choosing the certificate. It extends to explaining the contents of a document. Imagine a customer finalizing a divorce. They're about to sign a quitclaim deed. They ask, "If I sign this, does my ex still have a claim to the equity?" You might know the answer with 100% certainty, but you cannot say a word. You have to say, "I am not an attorney, and I cannot explain the legal consequences of this document to you."
It feels like terrible customer service, but it's the only way to protect yourself, and the penalties are severe. In New York, giving legal advice can lead to criminal prosecution, heavy fines, and actual imprisonment.
Imprisonment, yes, because bad legal advice can completely destroy a citizen's life.
We are going to dive into the actual catastrophes next. But really quick, if you want more insights like this in a visual format, make sure to check out our video podcast, No Notary, with Eddie Montes Travis and Marylyn's 90 Seconds of Notary. They are packed with quick, actionable advice for your daily practice.
Okay, let's look at the actual errors and omissions, the E&O court cases from our sources. What happens when notaries ignore these rules?
These cases are sobering. They show exactly how fast a routine Tuesday morning can turn into a multi-year financial nightmare. Let's start with careless mistakes. Case number 1, the expired seal.
A corporate employee accidentally grabbed a notary seal out of their desk that had expired a week prior. Because the seal was expired, the notarial act was legally invalid. The corporate document was rejected, and it ultimately cost the company $700 in administrative and delay fees.
$700 for grabbing the wrong stamp. Case number 2, the wrong certificate.
A notary utilized an incorrect notarial certificate on a deed of trust. Because of that specific error, the county recorder's office rejected the deed. The property transfer stalled, triggering a lawsuit. The notary had to be deposed, and while they were eventually dismissed, their E&O insurance took a massive hit. The attorney fees alone amounted to $20,000.
And their E&O policy was only for $25,000. They nearly exhausted their entire safety net over one careless clerical mistake. Let's look at case number 3, sloppy remote online notarization, or RON.
A notary was performing a remote notarization over video. They failed to properly examine the signer's ID documents through the camera, and they allowed another person to be present in the room off camera, actively helping them answer the knowledge-based security questions.
The KBA questions. If someone else is feeding them the answers, the entire security protocol is compromised.
Exactly. The transaction was fraudulent. The notary was found liable for facilitating the fraud through negligence and incurred $75,000 in settlement and legal fees.
$75,000 out of a standard $100,000 policy. That is life-altering. Moving to outright fraudster schemes. Case number 4, the car window rush.
A notary was approached by a frantic signer who didn't even get out of their car. They pressured the notary to process the documents quickly through the rolled-down window. The notary caved to the pressure and missed a glaring detail. The name on the driver's license did not match the name on the deed.
An imposter stealing a property.
Yes. The true owner sued, and the notary was hit with a $55,000 settlement payout plus $18,000 in attorney fees.
$73,000 gone because they didn't want to inconvenience someone. Case number 5, the incomplete acknowledgement.
A notary left a partially completed acknowledgement certificate stamped with their seal sitting on a table during a chaotic signing. The fraudster took it, copied the seal, and fraudulently transferred a property. The claim settled for $20,000. Guard your seal with your life.
Do not leave blank forms lying around. Ever. Okay, rule bending. Case number 6, the COVID Skype favor.
During the pandemic, a notary wanted to do a personal favor for a friend in another state, so they performed the notarization over a Skype video call, utterly violating the physical presence rule. A bitter lawsuit followed over the estate, and the notary lost thousands of dollars in legal fees defending their illegal Skype favor.
The rule is absolute. Do not bend the rules for anyone. Case number 7, knowingly accepting a fake ID.
A notary admitted they suspected a signer's ID was forged, but proceeded anyway, likely due to pressure from a real estate agent to close a multi-million-dollar deal. The fraudulent transfer cost the true owner $700,000. The notary's $100,000 E&O policy was completely exhausted instantly, leaving them facing financial ruin.
That is terrifying. But what if you do everything perfectly? Can you still get sued? Case number 8, The holographic will.
A mobile notary flawlessly notarized a handwritten will for an elderly signer. But months later, the family erupted into a vicious probate dispute. Because the notary was the official witness, they were immediately subpoenaed. The notary had to spend $7,000 in legal fees just to get themselves extracted from the crossfire.
They're doing their job perfectly. The stamp is a target on your back.
Which brings us to our final section, the human element. It's time for our segment. Good question. What would you do? We have some specific scenarios from listeners dealing with these exact human edge cases.
I love this segment. Let's get into it. First up, we have Derek from Nevada. Derek says, I was called to notarize a power of attorney for a man who had just gotten out of surgery. He was heavily medicated on pain meds. He had his ID, but he was slurring his words and kept falling asleep. What would you do?
Derek, you have to walk away. This goes directly to assessing capacity. You are the last line of defense for that vulnerable patient. If the patient is heavily medicated and completely disoriented, they lack the cognitive capacity to understand what they are signing. You cannot, under any circumstances, proceed.
Right, you pack up your stamp and you leave.
Exactly.
Okay, next we have Sophie from New York. A client brought in a handwritten letter they wanted notarized to send to a landlord. There was no certificate on it. They told me just to make it official. What would you do?
Sophie, as we discussed with UPL, especially in New York, you cannot choose the certificate. You tell the client, I cannot decide what type of notarization this letter requires. You must choose between an acknowledgement or a jurat, or you need to consult an attorney. Do not just attach a form to be helpful. It is practicing law without a license.
And New York does not mess around with that. Next is Tyler from Georgia. A guy came into my shipping store and presented a homemade ID card. He claimed he was a sovereign citizen and didn't recognize state IDs, but the homemade card had his photo and name. He demanded I notarize his document. What would you do?
Tyler, you refuse service. A notary must confidently walk away if the identification presented is insufficient. A homemade card is not a state-issued or federally issued unexpired ID. And remember, while you cannot refuse service for discriminatory reasons, refusing an invalid ID is a statutory requirement, not discrimination.
Good answer. Nina from Virginia asks, a woman brought in a contract that she had already signed at home. She just needed a jurat. She said she could just swear the oath right there. What would you do?
Nina, this is the coercion versus lie detector distinction. For a jurat, the physical signing cannot happen in the past. It is legally impossible. You have to tell her, I need to watch you sign this document in my presence. She must re-sign it right in front of you before you administer the oath.
Perfect. Last one, Leo from Indiana. I do mobile notary work at the county jail. An inmate needed a document notarized, but obviously they didn't have their driver's license on them. They only had their jail-issued wristband and ID badge. What would you do?
Leo, this is a great edge case. Most states, including Indiana, have specific provisions for relying on a current state-issued inmate identification card issued by the Department of Corrections or relying on credible identifying witnesses. You follow the specific statutory alternative for inmate ID in your state, log it meticulously in your journal, and proceed.
Wow. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've traced the rigid anatomy of the certificate, the absolute necessity of physical presence, the dangers of financial and familial interest, UPL, devastating E&O cases, and the deep complexities of human capacity.
It is a dense, high-stakes ecosystem. And without the notary, the courts would literally grind to a halt. Every contract, every deed would have to be proven from scratch. The notary stamp is the grease that allows commerce and civil law to function with trust and speed.
So to you, the listener, the next time you are sitting across a desk from a notary, you will finally understand exactly why they are behaving the way they do, why they're scrutinizing your ID, making you swear an oath, and asking if you are acting of your own free will.
They are protecting you and protecting the legal integrity of your document.
It is a heavy responsibility. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. We've talked extensively about the physical presence mandate, the human-to-human interaction, the wet ink signature. But look at the world we are accelerating into right now.
In digital era.
Right. We are entering an era of synthetic identity fraud. AI-generated voices can mimic your loved ones perfectly over a phone call. We are seeing deepfake videos that are indistinguishable from reality in real-time video chats. As our digital world becomes increasingly untrustworthy, will this ancient, rigid tradition of the impartial human witness and the wet ink signature eventually become obsolete? Or, ironically, will sitting in a physical room, breathing the same air with another human being, become the only thing we can truly trust to prove something actually happened?
A fascinating and terrifying question for the future of law.
It really is. Remember, if you have questions you want answered on the show, email your questions to Derek@dereksproul.com. We will try to answer as soon as possible at the end of our shows.
Let's run the credits. Exec producer Derek Sproul, lead writer Marylyn Lee Trotter, graphics Eddie Montes Travis, music Thomas Bynum, produced by Magnificent Works Business Solutions.
Don't just be listeners of the knowledge, be doers of the knowledge. This is notary knowledge.
Yes.
Until next time.
Ready to unlock your notary potential and boost your income? It's time to move beyond basic notarizations. In Notary, Niche Navigator by Derek Sproul, learn the most profitable specialized services. Learn to master high-demand areas like loan signings, international apostilles, and I-9 employment verifications. This essential guide offers new ideas to help you become the go-to expert in your field. Grab your copy of Notary, Niche Navigator by Derek Sproul today and start building your empire.